the regular board meeting for the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District meeting to order. First item of business is setting the agenda. Are there any changes?
I have something in the consent agenda area. The Clean Water Fund grant agreement is a roll call vote, so I don't think that can be a consent item. So we should move that down to the top of a new business.
All right.
And then I just have one tiny correction on the minutes, so I think those can stay in. I'll just add my correction there.
Okay.
And the Carp Solutions Shields Lake Survey Report, I don't have a problem with that being in consent, as long as there's a note referring readers to the section 4, and that's the results section, pages 4 to 6.
Any other, Mike?
Mr. President, I'd like to suggest that we move old business item 7A beneath the Hayward Avenue assessment and feasibility scope. Those tie in so well that after our initial review, while we have somebody here from Claros, that item will make more sense after review of these Hayward Avenue related items.
Okay.
So,
after both of them?
correct, so after item 7D.
Okay.
Delta.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the changes discussed.
I'll second.
All right. I have one discussion. I think we'll see how things go, but we may end up pulling 7G and 7H out for a workshop. They're the nitrogen study report and the governance manual revisions. If we're running ahead of schedule, which has not been our typical, but if we happen to be tonight, we may still get to them. But when we get to them, we'll see where we're at. So,
Okay.
So withhold that for a possible
right.
move, okay.
Any other discussion on the agenda? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, we have an agenda. All right, so the consent agenda, you had some.
Just on page 6 of the March 4th minutes, it's just a simple little typo. It's in paragraph H, 2, 3, the fourth line up, kind of toward the middle, instead of envelope, envelop, it should be envelope with an E.
Okay.
And then the other one was just adding a note in our minutes to reference the results section, pages 4 to 6 on that Carp Solutions report.
Okay. Just in the minutes that the
Yes.
results are captured in sections, or in results section on page 4 through 6.
Yeah.
All right. So do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Well, we already did that.
Oh, okay.
These were the changes that I made.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
With the additions?
Yes.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. So we have the public open forum. Anyone want to address the board tonight? All right. We'll close the public open forum. All right, we have the Citizens Advisory Committee update.
You know, after all this time, I'm still not used to Mike Sorensen not being the one to give the CAC update. Let's see. The biggest updates to the CAC, there still is not a chairperson chosen yet for the CAC. There seems to be some interest in maybe picking a chair and a co-chair so that one person doesn't have to take on all of the work of the chair for the CAC, but that will be picked up at the next meeting. The CAC is still moving forward, hopefully with an idea of hosting lake tours for local officials, trying to partner with the lake associations to get volunteers to utilize their own watercraft to take local government officials out on the lakes. Other than that, I think that's about where the CAC is at. We've had some pretty small meetings the last few months with everyone out of town, so it should be picking up again here this summer.
Questions for Jessica? Thanks, Jessica. All right, we'll move on to new business. We have the Rice Creek Watershed District and the Sunrise River Watershed Management Organization boundary review. Oh,
Mr. Chair, you'd move the Clean Water Fund resolution.
oh, that's
First
right.
item.
That's right. I forgot that. It's laying right here in front of me. All right, we have the FY19 Clean Water Fund grant agreement, the Bone Lake SWA implementation.
I'm going to make a motion to adopt Resolution 190301 as presented.
All right, we have a roll call vote. Any other discussion? All right. John Spence, aye. Jackie Anderson?
Aye.
Wayne Moe?
Aye.
Stephen Schmaltz?
Aye.
And Jen Oakney.
Aye.
All right, we have adopted the resolution. All right. Now to the boundary review.
Mr. President, managers, so recently I was contacted by the Sunrise River Watershed Management Organization about a number of parcels in the Anoka County area which appear to be orphaned as they were conducting their own boundary review. You may recall that just within the last couple of years, we did a boundary review with Rice Creek, but we ended at the county line and did not go any further at that time. Historically, the district, I think, with a 10-foot interval from our contour lines from the old USGS maps, it was maybe indeterminate at that time whether or not there were any parcels within the boundary. And also, it just provided another level of complexity of working with a third county. So presently, prior to directing engineers' time or anybody else to look into this further, I wanted to get some direction from the board as to whether or not, what sort of direction we would want. We could just leave it as is and there's no obligation. We have talked to Bowser about it for doing anything like that. They would still remain in the Sunrise River regardless, and then they would be responsible for any land management activities. However, we could also evaluate it, develop an MOU with whatever organization it might be, whether it's Rice Creek or the Sunrise, to look this over, or notify us if there's any development. Or the other option would be for us to investigate the boundary, determine if there's any actually draining into the Comfort Lake Forest Lake District, and then make a determination that we would want to have a boundary change to incorporate those. As we noted, at least preliminarily, they are a small number in a small area, quite small. However, these parcels are in question. Mm-hmm. So staff is looking for direction as how to proceed.
When the district was first, Mr. Chair, when the district was initially established 20 years ago, this area was part of the initial assessment from Bowser, but they chose not to include it because it was so small, so few parcels, and they didn't want to complicate, as Mike said, the situation with 3 counties. So there has been that confirmation. There should be in the file at Bowser somewhere. So my motion would be to instruct staff to investigate this. And if they are truly in our district, that our boundary should be changed. From the maps, if you remember some of the discussion over the past several years, there appears to be a low area about where the stockpiles are for the Highway 8 turnoff reconstruction that does come down into Bixby Park and connects to old JD2 and the Sunrise from that perspective. And then there's one up by Himes Lake that also comes from across the freeway and into Himes Lake.
But where is this located though, Mike? This is
So this, it's west of Highway 35, and I don't know if Jessica can pull it up or not. But it's, you can see there, there's Highway 8, but the line is, the boundary, that red line going north and south is the county boundary with Anoka County.
Gotcha.
So to the lower, that mud lake, you know, we transferred some of that property there to Rice Creek last year. So the bottom of that yellow circle is almost for sure Rice Creek. And then it appears that the area to the north flows to the Sunrise. You know, however, with LiDAR and other tools available to us today, we could more readily determine that. So if it's the board's wish, we can look at it technically and then just report back at that time, and then maybe make a more informed decision about how we may want to proceed.
Sure. All right.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, just to note, I believe there's a motion, but not a second.
I'll second Jackie's motion.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So the motion was to look into this,
Authorize staff
authorize staff.
to continue looking into this
Yeah.
and report
And
back.
to investigate the actual
Yep.
situation.
Yep.
All right, any other discussion? Yes, Steve?
How much is this gonna cost us in terms of time and effort? I remember last time it was like a year and a half before we get this Rice Creek thing finalized. And I guess my concern is that unless there's some special interest in this small little area, which also involves another county in our business, I would prefer to just save the money and time and be accurate but not precise. The cost of being precise, I mean, in many cases, we can't afford to do that, so with all the other things we gotta do, so that's my thought on it.
Well, it sounds like what we're gonna end up doing is Mike's gonna look into it and get us more information, and then at that point, I think we've got the decision to make about.
Okay.
Right?
Mr. Chair, Manager, so presently, so the Sunrise has done their initial boundary review, and then Rice Creek has a pending review for that area of their own. So what it would entail is waiting for them to complete their review and for the engineer and staff to review the findings of the two organizations and then report back. So it might take a while, but it's not necessarily going to require a lot of time.
So we're not gonna do a lot of field work in the field surveying and all that kind of stuff? It's-
Well, I mean, at some point during the, you know, prior to the next snowfall, we would probably go out there and evaluate it during a heavy rain event or something to see if there's any indication of confirming flow from some of these rather low, these boundary areas that, you know, for those changes, often it's hard to distinguish, just like JD6, when you went farther south into the water, the DNR's MWMA, you know, it's a large wetland. It's kind of like, okay, well, the water's flowing somewhere along here. The water's flowing that way, and then it's flowing this way. So it's so level, but so we'll allow, or presently the plan was to just simply allow those organizations to complete their reviews and then review their findings.
Which is what the motion is.
Yeah, which is essentially what the motion is. Any other discussion? All right, let's vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Let's move on to the 2019 AIS Prevention and Management Plan.
Mr. President, managers, the 2019 AIS Prevention and Management Plan is largely as it reflects what was budgeted by the board previously and based on previous discussions. The only variation is covered in the memo on the Shields Lake carp removal. We did not have anything funded for that, pending the results of the study, which the board has not reviewed. I've been in touch with the commercial fisherman. He is interested in doing an open water seine in the spring. However, they're not the most reliable. They cover a lot of area, multiple states. So timing is somewhat up to them. And so that being said, we we may be able to do it for something I just estimated based on past experience, somewhere around, $10,000 to $12,000, as noted. Carp Solutions has offered a different methodology in terms of these box netting, and their quote was $16,000. As we noted that the carp population is quite significant in that Shields Lake, and if we want to do an algae treatment this fall, we should look at removing a fairly substantial amount of biomass from that lake. Otherwise, we may consider other alternatives, but the other thing is that we could try to communicate with area bow fisher people. We know that there's a lot of that activity. We don't know if there's going to be that fishing contest this spring or not, but still there's probably a few around. They could just go right off the city park area there and enter, but there's some very large carp in there. So it's a public access and a public lake. People can go down there and fish. But we'd like to see a removal one way or the other, and we're just proposing then to try to cover it one way or the other. And that's our proposal, and this would be funded out of our reserve funds.
Mr. Chair, this was always part of the Shields Lake study, was to remove these carp. And Mr. Kenny mentioned that the board hasn't reviewed this report, but it was part of the consent agenda. Right. Just wanted to point that out, and it's pretty interesting information. And the conclusion here is that if we keep these large carp in there, they're going to disturb more sediment, and so our activities to clean the lake are not going to be as successful. And they're recommending an 80% reduction in these, and they're big. They're big carp. And the interesting thing to me also was that the carp barriers that we've been putting in these lakes are working, because the young carp are not coming in, and so you're actually doing an elimination process here. It's not just containment, it's elimination. So I think this is well worth it, and I think that we would be remiss if we didn't take this information we're getting and do the steps that are necessary to clean up the lake and not keep having these same activities recur over and over again. So I'm going to propose the motion. There's actually two here, but they kind of fit together. So I will make a motion to first vote on motion 1, which is to authorize the administrator to enter into contracts to perform carp removal on Shields Lake not to exceed $16,000. And then the second proposal motion as well is to take the money from our, or to add this, I'm sorry, to the 2019 AIS Prevention and Management Plan, and then to remove that from, or to take that money from reserve.
Okay. Do we have a second?
A second.
For both motions?
Yes.
All right. Both motions have been made and seconded. We'll vote on the first. Any other discussion? We'll vote on the first one. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion 1 is adopted. Motion 2, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion 2 is adopted. Any other on the AIS management plan, Mike? There wasn't anything else?
Not unless managers have questions. It's per the budget.
I have just a couple of comments and maybe a staff question. On the overall process that we do for monitoring lakes and our rivers, we use WCD and other technicians, I'm sure. But I wonder if we work with them on safe practices, or monitor that they are using safe practices so that they're not spreading AIS from one lake to another. And then also working with our marine businesses. Hallberg particularly likes to use Comfort for testing boats and so forth. And we have a new Forest Lake Marine on Highway 8. But then all the bait shops, Frankie's, Mike's, and there's probably another one I don't know about. But anyway, just making sure that our staff is communicating with these people every season so that we are impressing the message that we do have AIS and we need to protect the spread. So if they can be diligent about that, or maybe we provide some training for them. And then the other thing is we've got a couple of natural environment lakes that is mentioned in the report. They have to be treated differently when we're doing our treatments, especially sediment treatments and so on. But even for AIS chemical treatment. And so I would like to see us put the classification of the lakes on this report so that we know, we don't have to look it up all the time, but we know every time we look at this that there's 2 natural environment lakes, and I think the rest are all general development. But anyway, to make sure that that classification is there for us and our public as well. And then on Forest Lake, just a comment on the plant harvester efforts. I've talked a couple of years here now about the plant material that's left after harvesting, and if you get wind and rough conditions, that plant material can be floating around in the lake. A lot of it seems to go to the shorelines in the Bay Area, and I'm just wondering if we can look at picking that material up and not leaving it to the individual residences. There's a big cluster that occurs on the second basin near Agua Restaurant, and that's gets very smelly and very stinky, and boats coming in, of course, are trailing all of that material in as well.
So is it not the case that when the harvester runs, they don't go into the Eurasian milfoil beds, right? Or at least they're supposed to not go into them. They might run
Correct,
into
ma'am.
I'm not talking about AIS. I'm talking about just the plant material.
just a regular old plant
I'm talking about the
material.
plant material. There's so
Gotcha.
much of it.
Okay.
And it accumulates in these bay areas, and it's,
How do we know that?
well, it occurs right after the harvest.
I mean,
When you get these big, I would almost like to understand how many pounds of that stuff we have, but it's really pretty gross.
So the harvester doesn't attempt to remove that stuff?
no, I think the harvester probably picks up 80% of it.
Okay, 80%.
I'm just guessing right now, but that's kind of typical of any harvester, and I think that try to go back and reclaim all that material, it's pretty difficult to do, so.
Do you know if they've ever done that with the harvester? This is just the way it's always?
Right, the harvester, I mean, why I was asking the question about the source of the weed buildup is last year we had tremendous amount of weeds blowing loose and forming big bogs, especially on Second Lake. And I think maybe that's what Manager Anderson was referring to. And the harvesters then used to pick that up and get rid of it.
To pull it out?
Yeah, because it actually blocks traffic, and actually some people couldn't even get their boats off their docks. So, but I think it'd be a big expense to try to pick up that last 20%. And I know that a lot of people are unhappy about it when it comes on shore, if you're downwind from it. But
Sure,
this is kind of the fact of life that you have to live with.
Yeah, well, I've never heard that ratio breakdown. I brought this up the last couple of years. I've never heard a ratio breakdown, and that the harvester they're not capable of handling too much of that waste product. So maybe they have a boat that comes behind it and picks it up, I don't know. All I'm asking is that the staff look into it.
Yeah,
Is there
yeah.
some way to, and if it's been done already, then provide a memo to that effect, and I can file it away and not bring it up every year, but it is something that I think we should look at if we can.
Have them look into can they improve?
Yeah.
Well, again, I think this is spending time on something maybe that's been around here for years and years, and I think that even if you want to pick it up, the city would have to pay for it, and I'm not sure we get the city to spend another $15,000 or $20,000. Plus, you've got the Lake Association involved. We're the original sponsor of that whole thing, switching it back to the city. So I think that we should just leave it be and be happy that we have a harvester that can actually can you keep the channels open and so forth, rather than doing additional chemical treatment.
It wouldn't
So
hurt.
I would like to put it to a vote before we actually spend any more time on it.
And it's not chemical treatment, it's some way to just pick up that residue that occurs on the shoreline, that ends up accumulating on the shoreline. So it's not a chemical treatment.
You would have everybody on, all 900 people on the lake calling you to come out and pick up the weeds off the shoreline. And I would say 80% of those are from normal wash up, breaking loose and washing on shore. You can't differentiate what's the harvesters and what's normal breakdown and blowing on shore. So I think we'd be opening the city and the Lake Association up to a big risk in terms of additional cost. And so I think.
Can we have staff just look into it with the city and then come back and tell us what the city says about the situation and go from there? Hey, Mike.
Mr. President, managers, so several years ago, the harvester was operated by volunteers. We worked with the city on two areas. One is that we coordinated getting the permit for them and limited their route for that activity to areas of need. So, so we could provide the map that they have the permit for doing the harvester. So it's pretty limited. And then also, we worked with them on installing a GPS unit, so then we could verify the activity, because we also then, we wanted everybody to know that we knew when the machine was on, we could track where it was going, and then to try to limit any extra cutting activity in areas specifically that would cause more harm than good, but also just that, I mean, its intended purpose is just for some, channel openings, and that's it. So its activity is fairly limited, but we could provide all the details of that information first. This summer we could do some evaluation of a few different shorelines, try to look at what the plant makeup, if we can distinguish that, and then maybe get some quantification numbers from the city as to how much they actually harvest. So.
Yeah, if you could put in some minimal effort on that and then let us know.
Again, I think spending time on something that we could do 100 of these things a year if we wanted to. It's just going to eat into our time. So that's why I think we should not be bogged down with it. We can take a vote on it.
All right. Somebody want to make a motion about it?
I will move to direct staff to evaluate the cleaning up of stray plant material after the harvesting on Forest Lake.
Anybody second? All right. No second. So motion dies. All right. All right. Anything else on the AIS Prevention and Management Plan? All right. Let's move on to the next item, the Team Up calendar.
Mr. President, managers, Jessica has pulled up just a simple display of what this calendar would look like. The memo describes it. We're hoping that we can just use it to coordinate workshops, special meetings, or other activities. Quite simple to use, and you can access it yourselves directly and fill it in, or you could provide staff with your information and then we can complete it. And then this would be just used for the 5 managers to review at any time as well, to see if who's in town or others, but most of it's for us to better coordinate with the board as a whole.
Okay. Looks like it's relatively easy to use.
Mm-hmm.
So
Is this a free service?
Yeah, so it's free, and one thing I'll note here is that your view would look a little bit different. So I have the administrator link to this, meaning I could add events for each manager. each manager would get a link specifically for themselves. So it's not like everybody could accidentally edit somebody else's, that type of thing. But yes, it's free.
Nice.
We can go in and update it and keep it up to date, and that's gonna be the big one, is keeping it up to date.
So are we asked to put in like a full day, or like just half days, or like 3 hours at a time that we're not available, or how, to what degree of specificity do we want here?
Yeah.
Just so we all do the same thing.
Yeah, I think the staff's idea was, you know, when you're out of town, you know.
You're really not available.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So
From
you
the
don't,
day.
you know that I'm not gonna be available from 12 to 10 next Wednesday?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. I think it's mostly to know when
Travel plans,
vacations are overlapping and when we might have to wonder, would we be able to make a quorum? Would it be close? That type of
Okay,
thing.
gotcha.
So full day type increments.
Perfect, okay.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Mm-hmm.
could you go over the security of it a little bit? I mean, like, I know that we're public officials and a lot of stuff about us is public, but this is not, how is this protected?
I mean, that's a great question as far as how that goes. I mean, on my end, I know that, you know, the staff will be the only ones, staff and managers that have the physical passwords to log in, but I think it would go over to Chuck and Mike to answer that question.
If you pull it up again, please. So it is an HTTPS
Yep.
site. So there is a level of security that goes with that, how robust their system is, but this is not anything that we would put available online or anything else. This would just be an internal piece that we would use.
Okay.
And as far as detail, all you care about is that we're just not available. You don't care why we're not available. It's not gonna, we're not gonna put in, you know, dentist or something.
Empty house, please, Rob.
Empty house, please, Rob. That's the one we most worry about. My
Right.
wife and I didn't post anything about us being gone all the time we were gone, because you just never know, right? That's the only other one, yeah, is security of individual houses and stuff.
There's no personal information other than our names though, correct?
Correct,
Yeah.
yep.
And
we
we're
could
logging
probably-
into the district's computer system? Yeah, that's
No,
where it's
a
housed?
Webs,
Or
This
it's
is
cloud?
Team Up is a third-party entity.
Okay.
so it is available on the web, so. Okay. Well,
We
Mr. Chair?
we could provide code names for board members.
yeah, code name.
Well, I would just say the information itself would not be public information. So it's just a matter of how secure the system is internally.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's always the big question anymore. We can just assume that all of our information is available in the public eye, whether we want it or not. All right. So if everyone could go out and spend some time, at least for the next couple of months, for sure, getting their calendars up to date, it would help staff, so. Thank you. All right, the draft 2018 water monitoring report.
Mr. President, managers, as noted, draft report is available for review. If any of the managers would like a hard copy, we can provide that. We are looking for comments back in time for the regular meeting in April, which is the 18th. The final report would then be accepted at the May meeting. So we will have discussion and comments at the April 18th meeting, and then the final report will come in May.
Okay.
This is our typical process over 3 months.
Right.
In the spring.
Okay.
So this note about needing feedback by the 5th is not true? It's anytime before the next meeting? Or do you want time to
Well,
review some, imagine?
if you can provide comments by the 5th, then we will incorporate it into the public version that goes out in the next board packet.
Okay.
So the sooner we can get the input and the comments, the staff would be able to make that closer to, and then everybody, frankly, the other board members could see the comments or adjustments that would be made. Or if there's questions, technical questions of data, observing a trend maybe, needing more clarification, then whether it's Dr. Funke or the WCD staff, or just presentation from, of the material, then we could incorporate all of that into the final draft to go to the board for April.
Okay.
But we would expect more discussion at the April 18th meeting.
Okay. All right, anything else on that? All right. Legislation item. I don't know if everyone's been following the legislative updates from Maud. I have been, and I've been getting them in email. Looks like things are moving along, and Jackie, I know
Yeah.
you probably more.
Yeah, I just had one question. I left a message for Rice Creek, Phil, the administrator at Rice Creek. There's special legislation that was not part of the MAUD agenda, but it's a Washington County Rice Creek Watershed District special bill, so that any monies coming out of Washington County for Rice Creek stays in the Washington County boundary. So, so that's a little concerning. I asked Phil just to give some background on that, what generated it.
I did see that one, and do we know any of the, so we don't know anything about where that came from?
Well, I assume it came from Rice Creek. Oh, Mike does.
Mike.
Mr. President, managers, so for some number of years, I have heard comments at various meetings, both at Washington County and elsewhere, about this topic, that the Washington County funds are going into the rest of the area of Rice Creek to make improvements, not in Washington County. So the legislation is actually for 90% of the money to be incorporated into Washington County. It is a concern, I would agree, because it's a little myopic from the standpoint that imagine, well, I don't think they considered the example of would they be okay with using Washington County funds to make an improvement to Moody Lake, which then drains into a Washington County water body. So, so while I understand the concern, if you're thinking about things from a watershed basis, this legislation I find fault in. Frankly.
Yes. Oh, Chuck. Yes.
Board members, the legislation did not originate with the Watershed District, and it didn't originate with the county either. And the Rice Creek Board adopted a resolution opposing it, and representatives, along with MAUD folks, have had conversations with the sponsors, who also were unclear about exactly about the request that was made to them to sponsor it. And after discussion with Rice Creek and MAUD folks, the sponsors, I believe, are not pushing it. And it got referred to committee, but it didn't make it out of committee in either house, which means that it's not moving forward unless somebody tries to put it into a bill as an amendment.
Okay. So probably is not going to see the light of day.
Yeah, everybody felt strongly, obviously Rice Creek folks and MAUD folks, that the concept undermines the notion of watershed management.
Right. Okay. Anything else on legislation? All right. Let's move on to old business. We're going to skip 7A for now, and we're going to look at the Castlewood Sub-Watershed Assessment Report.
Mr. President, managers, I think this is maybe a short review. Dr. Funky maybe has a few comments and a couple of slides, but you know, overall, as part of our process, our diagnostic monitoring process and moving up into the water body, Greg and I had to walk this property. It was July 12th when we had that 5-inch rain just a few hours before, and we had observed really a lack of cover on this farm property, and so then from that had directed additional monitoring, some grab samples, which then has led to the results and the findings. So and our the rental of the property. But go ahead.
Okay.
Mr. President, managers, I just have a couple slides. They're the same format as the other sub-watersheds in Forest Lake, just since we keep them posted for consistency. But just go through quicker. Oh yeah, I do. Thank you. Look at it. So just again, this subwatershed was a little different than Hayward and JD6 in that we really were just doing that tributary monitoring, kind of working our way up to verify where the loads were coming from south of Highway 97 and just looking for other potential projects. So a little less involved than some of the work we've done in Hayward and JD6. But again, here's just some of the diagnostic summary stats to match with the other ones, the 5% of the area. 20 pounds per year reduction we're looking that goes into that middle basin. So again, this is one where we had several years of monitoring. So 2018 was really to see, okay, if we do a continuous year of monitoring, what is the actual load, not just concentration. So we saw that the flow weighted mean concentration is higher upstream of that golf course, south of 97. So we just wanted confirmation of that. And then, through this, what Mike mentioned, is getting some samples coming off of that field site just to go out while it's raining. So Mike Majeski and our crew also was out after a rain event just to look for observations of field erosion. And so we did find those. So the high priority project, again, was that agricultural field, which you've seen in a board packet. There's a rental agreement to convert to perennial vegetation, which will begin this year. So that project essentially completed before this assessment wrapped up. But just in the future, we will want to reassess the catchment loadings after the property's been converted to perennial vegetation. So other projects are, we've looked at the Castlewood Golf Course in detail. There's some options there. If need be, we can partner with the city as opportunities arise, and then also in that neighborhood, just keeping our eye on opportunities for improvements as we see. But otherwise, primarily, that field is contributing what we see as a lot of the load, so we'll be interested to see with some maybe follow-up monitoring next year to see if there's improvements for the year after. So.
Any other questions for Megan about the report or concerns? No. So when do we expect that we'll monitor again? Is 2020?
Depending on how the implementation goes,
Okay.
there might be some soil amendments we need to do, so I guess we'll see
We'll
at
see.
the end of this year if we get some crop or vegetation covered.
Okay. Yeah.
I just have a question here. On page 15, it talks about the ag field. Obviously, that's the big contributor. But the agreement hasn't been signed by both parties. What's the status of that? Is that
The rental agreement?
The rental agreement has been signed.
So
okay?
we are renting it at this point.
So
Correct.
then this isn't correct on page 15?
Managers, we completed the report prior to just the confirmation of that, so this was just left, as the status in 2018. So it has been signed.
So this is, okay. Would it be worth updating the report?
Sure. Yep.
You just-
Yep. That would be easy to do.
That'll simplify it. If someone
Yeah,
else gets it and
post it.
reads it, they'll know we've got it. Okay. So with that change, any other discussion about accepting the report?
I'll make a motion to accept the report with the change that Jackie mentioned. Castlewood East Assessment and Feasibility Study.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Alrighty. Haywood Avenue Subwatershed Assessment Report.
Go ahead, Dr.
President and managers, we move into Hayward. In our next subwatershed. So in this feasibility study, we had a few more components similar to the JD6 feasibility that was presented in January. So we did some wetland characteristics of different areas within that catchment. We did perform a swim model update in this neighborhood, and then also look for potential projects. So again, with that diagnostic summary, so we're just east of the West Basin in the Hayward Avenue neighborhood. So this is 5% of the flow, but 9% of the load. So this had a very high flow weight and concentration coming from this area, and that's why it was a priority. So we have some reductions that were identified in the Forest Lake diagnostic. It gets a little confusing because some go to the middle basin, some to the west basin, that we kept track individually. So just carrying that forward to show in this presentation where those reductions would go within Forest Lake. In the report, again, there's an appendix with a lot of detail on current and historic land cover that is interesting, but it's there. So now that that's there. Again, we put out some wetland water level monitoring equipment like we did in the Washington Judicial JITS 6 system. And again, it was really this question, wherever we have flow through these wetlands, there's some ditching and flow pathways. So how hydrologically connected are the ditches to the surrounding wetland? Is it a stable wetland when we get a rainfall event? Do we see large fluctuations in water levels or not? So, just in summary, the R3 wetland, it maintains its seasonal hydrology, so I don't know what the hydrologic benefits of a wetland restoration might be. That helped inform what sort of projects we were identifying. And again, in the R5 and R15 catchments, so there's basically 3 pieces to this watershed. So R5 and R15 on the west side, again, this seemed more stable, surface water driven, and we didn't see strong influences with artificial drainage, as different than the JD6 system. So.
Okay.
Again, just a quick, mention. So there was a lot of time spent on the swim model and going out in the field and verifying where culverts are. We had drawings from the city, just figuring out where that infrastructure is. So, again, like in JD6, a lot of depressions and wetlands were added to the model, building on that complexity, which will aid in project planning and identification for the impacts on any surrounding property. So going through the projects, and this is what matches up then with the scope of work that follows, and I'll finish with a slide that launches into that scope of work for 2019. But you can see this R3 catchment is the catchment that drains south into the middle basin. It's on this eastern side in the map. So in the yellow circle, there's a ditch that drains the wetland just north of it. This is one of the stations we monitored at. It has a high fraction of dissolved phosphorus. It's a ditch wetland. The wetland north of it has a lot of backyards that drain into it. So there's a lot of parcels that interact in that wetland. So a potential project that is a higher priority would be to treat the water as it flows south of North Shore Trail. And one of the options would be with this Claros aggregate that has been presented, this would be a place we could see about a potential pilot test site to put some of that media to augment some sort of ditch check or treatment in that outlet drainage. Other options would be just a subsurface permeable drain trench. And then the nice thing is there's a driveway adjacent to that site, so it makes any sort of project and access much more feasible than some other areas that are remote. So in this catchment, and that was what was referred in the subsequent scope, but there's some overlap with this Claros pilot project proposal. So that's the location when we get to that scope of work and when we reorganize the agenda. So that's the area it's talking about, but that's a key project to look into. One of the issues then with the wetland enhancement just north of it is I just mentioned that there's a lot of property owners. So anything that we might do to that wetland would have to be limited. If we back up the water at all, it's going to go into people's backyards. So it makes it complicated. Moving to the west, this is the R15 catchment. Drains, it starts in this neighborhood, kind of goes through a wetland to the south, and then flows west through another wetland and outlets into the west basin. So again, there's some reduction potential for phosphorus. There's a lot of dissolved phosphorus coming out. And at the outlet of that catchment, there is a wetland that's basically comprised of 2 city-owned parcels. So we've talked somewhat about cattail harvesting And this could be a potential site where that may be applicable. There's a lot of cattail currently in that wetland. Unknowns are, really what the water levels look like year-round, substrate is, so there's the whole feasibility of how would we get equipment, when's the best time to remove it, so that you can get equipment, but also remove as much phosphorus from the biomass as you can. So balancing those two needs. So that is in the scope of work, and we'll get to that at the end, but that's a high priority project we feel in this catchment. So again, I was mentioning there's this R3 wetland restoration, medium priority just because of the large number of landowners and limited nature of things that we could do because of that. Okay. Moving to the R5 catchment in the north, other future projects, medium priority, there's several agricultural fields that the district could pursue, cost share, look at their management practices. There may be some livestock associated, what we think might be a creamery, just outside of the catchment. So district can engage with those landowners, work with the conservation district on that. So next step would really just be to kind of gauge interest in those landowners and BMPs.
Well, before you go off of this slide, Megan, I'll pass these down the line. I don't need them, but I wonder if Jessica, if you could find, well, I can probably explain it from here, but okay, so in the Ag BMPs area, that there's kind of a tree line sort of in the center. There's some trees there and whatnot. And when I was yep, right there. So just to the east of that on that field, about a week and a half ago, I was going into town on a Saturday, and this field here on the east, and then just to the west of those tree lines, which is actually pretty close to those ponds, there was manure spread on the fields, and then like 2 or 3 days later, we had those 2 days of rain. So you might want to make a note of that, because we're probably still contributing to that pond area, even though that was probably some legacy stuff there before, but I think we're probably still contributing to that. And then right on the southeast part of that Ag BMPs, the yellow circle's covering it right now, but that's the buildings where the farm is, and just to the east of those buildings, I believe, is kind of where he feeds his animals, and it looks like from a satellite map that it goes down into a wetland down here, so that's not probably part of this area, but it still eventually drains into Forest Lake, so we should check with that and see if there's some Ag BMPs or better manure management possibly. But I'll send these down so you guys can look at them, and you can give them to Megan.
That was almost over to the ponds, you said, those
Yeah,
pictures?
well, there was manure spread back in here too, to the west of those trees.
Okay.
And the field on the east, and so,
Yeah.
I mean, it's really close to that pond area.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, so working with those landowners on the manure application practices and better ways to do that would be a good maybe step to talk about with the conservation district. Yeah. Right, and then moving downstream of that R5, in that R5 catchment, one of the things that we propose moving forward then is, there does seem that there potentially then would be some legacy impacts, is looking at what's going on in that pond. It's just at the base of some parcels just south of the pond. So really just looking at, is there any accumulated wetland sediment? How deep are they? How deep is the accumulated sediment? Are there any things we can do to kind of clean out and enhance that wetland pond to enhance treatment through that system. So there's some, in the scope of works, some work to collect some sediment cores and assess that wetland pond. Another option as well is in this R15 catchment to the south, in the headwaters of that catchment, so where all the water starts before it flows through the series of wetlands. In that neighborhood, there is an opportunity to implement some infiltration into the rural road section right away. So it's potentially could be a nice coordination partnership with the neighborhood residents in the district to implement some rain gardens. You know, some of the unknowns and things that we would need to look into just to assess feasibility is, you know, what are the soils like? Can they infiltrate anything? Is there room without running into a lot of infrastructure, you know, pipes and all that? And then is there even any interest by those neighborhood residents? But one thing to note is in terms of the phosphorus reduction benefit, that it goes through the series of wetlands after that, so we wouldn't see a really big impact on the lake. It would just be improving that neighborhood. You know, it was developed prior to the stormwater rules and really that outreach component. And then probably our one, I guess, low priority project was in the R15 catchment, that the wetland just south of that neighborhood. It receives a lot of that neighborhood runoff. You know, we could pursue looking at doing some sort of enhancement of that wetland if you can't do the rain gardens, but there's a lot of parcels that intersect with that wetland boundary. So, you know, that would be a very low priority to pursue if the other options don't work out. So the next step of feasibility and planning that we recommended looking at by EOR staff as a scope of work in 2019 is some of that additional work for the cattail harvesting suitability, looking at the feasibility of the neighborhood rain gardens, and then also that pond clean out in that northern catchment. You know, we mentioned this ditch check work in Claros. We did not assign any sort of budget, but because that's part of this other scope of work and research project. So I guess I would see if there's any questions on the actual report, and then I could move to the scope of work.
I just wanted clarification on something that you just said. Is it R15 or R5 that you said was probably not going to achieve much phosphorus reduction?
Oh, well, in the headwaters of the R15, so that neighborhood rain gardens, just in terms of whatever project we implement, so a rain garden, you just get a loss of just that immediate reduction in phosphorus you would see at the discharge point, because it's up in the headwaters and it goes through the series of wetlands. And there's other processes that might be at play, legacy loading in those wetlands. So you wouldn't see the direct benefit of the rain gardens.
Or a high benefit even.
Pardon?
Or a high benefit from that project. So how much of that area is part of this 13,286 for R15? Is it separated out at all? Maybe into the different areas?
The rain garden is the whole,
13,000.
that's the whole rain garden
That's the whole thing?
task, yeah.
Oh, okay,
Pardon me, in the scope of work, the budget.
okay.
It
all
is
right.
though.
So that's all that. Any other questions about the assessment and feasibility study? We got two.
Go ahead.
Mr. President, the cattail harvesting, I don't have a full report in front of me, but, and I know that we drove by it, but I can't remember, is it hybrid cattail? Is it invasive cattail? Is it native cattail?
I think it was mostly hybrid.
Narrow leaf hybrid, it says. Prevalent narrow leaf
Okay.
hybrid.
Thank you. Okay, so is this something that would be repeatedly harvested, like maybe every fall or every winter? If it's harvested frequently or long enough, it's going to cut down on the seed source. Would it be something that the Watershed or somebody would ever be interested in maybe restoring to a more natural system? maybe something that functions a little bit better? And then on a sidebar, is it something that the Watershed or somebody could potentially dredge out some of the, some of the seed source, but also some of the phosphorus sediment? I know that there's plenty of rules regulating that, but I just wondered your thoughts on those.
So Manager Oknick, those are great points, and some of the discussion that we had internally when we were talking about the feasibility of the cattail harvesting.
Okay.
So part of just assessing how we would feasibly do the cattail harvesting would be frequency. And so we have in the scope to take some sediment samples from the soil to get a sense of, right, what's the nutrient content like, and is it consistent, or there's some areas that have a lot of nutrients that are kind of propagating this, monoculture. And then also, right, if we start to harvest them regularly, we will start to promote habitat for different natives. So restoration of native vegetation would be a part of any long-term plan we would have if it's feasible.
Okay.
But, and then also the excavation, that was a component of the Moody Wetland Project, in small amounts, creating more of a diverse habitat, so more open water is a net benefit for those wetlands, so.
Thank you.
Steve?
In your Hayward Avenue assessment discussion, you mentioned a number of cases where there was still some septic tanks, active septic tanks in the area. And should we be looking at those to check to make sure they're performing correctly or not? I'm just raising the question because I was surprised to hear that. Or is that something we really shouldn't concern ourselves with?
I guess I would say I think it'd be worthwhile to, potentially consider some education for residents about aging septics and maintenance of those septics. I don't know that it's worth it for the district to go out and start assessing those on their own. You may want to think about that as a kind of a bigger holistic project at some point, education, but I guess at this point, we're not recommending that the district go out and start inspecting individual septic systems.
Does Washington County have a program to convert those over or not? Is there? I thought I read somewhere where
It's
there was.
to replace.
Replace.
Yeah, because converting would mean the city would have to, or the Met Council would have to extend sewer lines out there.
That's right, okay.
And I think there's a loan program in Chisago County for
Yeah, well, all
replacement.
Yeah, I shouldn't say all counties, but a lot of counties with septic systems have that program.
Yeah, just to help the residents to
Yeah.
get their systems
Yeah.
replaced.
I don't know that the city does, but
No.
that's something that maybe could be looked at by the city.
But they need to know their system is failing, right, which a lot of people don't necessarily know. I mean, they should probably, because they should be, I don't know, it's just in Wyoming, we have to pump every 3 years, and at least have.
Well, that's because the township first, and the city,
Right.
when they annexed the township, accepted those ordinances, but it's a very aggressive program to monitor and make sure that septics are working.
Right. And even that, it
Or
could still be
replace.
failing in some way, and you might not know it. Because it could be the drain field problem, and you wouldn't know it necessarily.
Well, that's part of
with
the
tank.
inspection though, is that every
Yeah.
so often you have to have, not just pumped, but inspected as well.
Well, they only inspect the
Or
baffles
accuracy.
inside the tanks.
Mhm.
They've never gone into the drain field, and
But the people that come out, if they suspect
Yeah.
any type of damage, they're required to report
they
it.
must report
Yeah,
it.
and then the city takes action after
I
that.
think, Manager Smalls, the area you're talking about, I think that, I saw that mentioned in this R5 catchment, I think is where it was. And seeing what I saw from this Ag BMP's area, if you go on an aerial map and look at this area, you can actually see kind of where the water flows. So I'm guessing if there's high levels around this pond, it's coming from the Ag BMP's area. That's my guess, because it's like, you can see where the water flows through here, and I'm guessing that's probably where we're getting anything that has to do with the bacteria and the extra nutrients, or the majority of it anyway.
Just a comment on that, R15 catchment, the cattail harvesting, that thing dries out quite a bit during the summer. Wet, dry, because I live right across the street from there. And it runs probably constantly until end of May, and then it drains out, and then it'll be dry, and if you get heavy rain, it fills up, and then drains out. So it's drying, wet, dry, wet all the time, so I don't know whether that's good or bad, but I
Yeah,
know
definitely having that drying out
it's
is,
a problem, right?
well, the drying out will actually be helpful for the
Harvesting.
The harvest.
Okay.
It's just a matter of, you know, is there mineral soils beneath some layer of peat, or is there 20 feet of peat? If there's 20 feet of peat, then it's gonna be, you know, unless you're gonna go out there and hand cut it with a scythe, it's
Okay.
gonna be quite difficult. So that's part of the scope of the work, is figure out is,
What's there?
what are those substrate materials and what's the phosphorus content in those materials as well.
And the last question, I'm not clear why, it sounded like the ag BMPs might be a fairly big potential for us, but I don't see it's on here. Is there, did I miss why we aren't gonna pursue that?
It just wouldn't be part of EOR's scope of work, but we'd still recommend that SWCD and
Oh,
district
okay.
staff,
So
you know,
take a look at
pursue
it. Okay,
that.
got it, thank you.
Okay, so we've looked at the assessment and feasibility study. Are there any more comments on that? Mike?
Mr. President, managers, just so you know, I have a meeting with the county staff. They are presenting the subsurface sewage treatment system risk assessment tool next Wednesday. So related to this whole topic of, so there's been an ongoing effort. The county does have a loan program. And it is a question I have. I know that for my system, which is not in Washington County, it does get, the whole system gets inspected every 3 years, and whether or not then, you know, other counties would want to adopt that, you know, whether it's through the One Watershed, One Plan effort or anything else, but we have talked among that with staff as well, so I know I've looked at the harvesting as well. The amount during the growing season is substantially higher than the winter, so that's certainly a factor, and we'll need the assessment to determine whether or not we can get any equipment out there. So, thank you.
All right. So are we ready to accept the report?
I'll make a motion to accept the Hayward Avenue assessment and feasibility study.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Now the feasibility scope, the scope of work. Any questions or concerns about the scope of work? We have 4 tasks, only one of them is covered by the Claros work, and the other 3 would be EOR work. Task 2, 3, and 4.
I only, Mr. Chair, I only have a question on this task 3, R15 catch basement for Hayward Avenue. If it doesn't have a big potential for benefit, then I wonder if we shouldn't just pursue that through education through our BMP program.
The rain garden project, right? What would be the benefit of doing the rain garden project from the engineering perspective?
Well, I guess I'd just add to, so as Dr. Funky pointed out, that, you know, the direct impact to the lake might not be as big as some of these other projects because it's disconnected through these wetlands basins, but it would be, you know, it'd have the benefit of kind of protecting or reducing the loading to those wetland basins and preventing those from getting further impacted. And then also there's just kind of the educational component of, you know, I think this neighborhood is pretty well suited for these rain gardens potentially, and so having a neighborhood that has a bunch of rain gardens may be a nice demonstration project to kind of take people out and show how these can help water quality. So I agree that out of the three or four projects listed here, it's probably the lowest priority, but we did still include it because we thought it had some good potential.
Now, these are only supposed to be in the road right-of-ways though, correct? Not on personal property?
Road right away, but you know, that's, people consider that part of their.
We think it's part of it.
But it's not technically, so wouldn't this be something to work with the city on, rather than individual landowners?
Well, it's the city parcel, but I mean, it's the individual parcels, but the city owns the right of way that goes on to them. So I think you need to coordinate with, we'd have to coordinate with both for sure, the city and the residents.
No matter what, right, you'd have to talk to the landowners, even if the
about,
city has the right of way.
I seem to remember, it seems like Angie Hong had said something before about that she's pretty good at, like if we've got an area that we wanna target, I think has told me before, or us, or whatever, that she's pretty good at going into those areas and getting people signed up. Maybe we could talk to her.
Yep, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the first step is just to, you know, do a little bit of engineering assessment of the soils, and then also how much utilities are in those right of ways to kind of see if it's.
And that's what we would get with this task. It's really not doing any rain gardens, it's just assessing what's there and what projects might be feasible in that area. So that's a good first step.
Correct.
And then from there, we could have Angie, if we wanted to, work with the city and the landowners to maybe put these in.
Or to find out definitively if it's really necessary to go to the landowners.
Yeah,
If
that's
this
true.
is, this is city property, right-of-ways don't belong to the individuals anymore, unless they're not being used for a purpose. But if this is being used for demonstrating how a coordinated effort with the district and the local government unit can help improve downstream waters and treat more than what's being done, then I think that makes sense. So if that's all this is doing, is doing the soil borings, as it says, and hopefully coming to a decision on whether the landowner needs to be involved or not, or if it's a city project.
Sure, that'd be good to know.
Well, I think we need to make sure that we find that answer out during that process.
Yep.
Would you be able to determine how much phosphorus might be available to remove with those studies or not?
Yeah, we could do some
Desktop.
fairly simple desktop work just to assess, you know, we might get X number of pounds of phosphorus removed.
Yeah, it's gonna be a small amount.
Okay, any other questions about the scope? Do we want to adopt all three tasks, or 2, or 1, or 0? What's our preference?
The forecast?
No, there's 4 tasks, but task 1 is the Claros technology, it's a different project. So we only are looking at funding this work with EOR of task 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. I'll make a motion to authorize the administrator on advice of council to enter into an agreement with the Emmons and Olivier Resources in accordance with the March 19th, 2019 scope of work. Is that the one? In an amount not to exceed $34,804. Is that?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? Call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. All right. WJD 6 assessment and feasibility scope.
Mr. President,
Yes.
we had that other item we
Oh,
moved down
time.
after that.
Sorry. Yes, the
So-
Claros technology item. Sorry. I had it laid here where I would not forget it, and I did.
John
Item
wouldn't mind
7.
staying to the end.
All right.
Mr. President, managers, you recall that in January, we had some discussion on this matter. And then district staff work with some of the, both the district engineer and Claros staff are putting together a initial proposal for the, grant proposal for the LCCMR. In addition, though, what we are proposing here is at least a start to understand the scientific elements of this technology and how it could be implemented in the field for non-point source related types of pollution. And so we have put together this memo of these various sites. And one was described in the Hayward Avenue drainage area. The other two, the Moody Lake wetland, we know that, or you may recall that we have phase 2 for that wetland project. Incorporates a wetland area on the neighboring property to the south, Mr. Peterson's, and so that's where that one is located. Lake Trail has not been determined as to where that would be, but you get the gist of it. So we do have John Brockstein from Claros here, he's available for questions, as well as staff.
So what's the amount of the LCCMR grant that we asked for? Do you?
$150,000.
Okay. So cover, no, it wouldn't cover this?
No, because these would be funds expended prior to.
Oh, but.
What we would do with the LCCMR grant is to continue the evaluation and also look at new sites. To
With
expand.
new projects
Right.
going forward.
We are evaluating new other grants for this presently. St. Croix River Association just announced $250,000 that they receive from MPCA for projects or practices related to phosphorus reduction within the St. Croix River, and something in particular focus on innovation. So I think we would qualify. The maximum there is $40,000. So, and actually, I just had talked with Emily Hines about this again this morning, about looking at the Mortensen Foundation, and then we'll just independently just reach out to some of our regular agencies that we work with to see if there's something different. We do not expect that this will be eligible for the Clean Water Fund because it's still too new. But so this would be something that at this present time would be funded by the district.
And that would be coming out of reserves at this point?
Correct, it would be coming out of reserves. There are some unknowns, particularly with the Hayward Avenue drainage outlet. We have not talked with the property owner about the site where this would be located yet.
Okay.
So we wanted to first kind of get to this point. We do not expect that we would have anything in the ground this season, frankly, on that site, given all the technical elements and negotiations, landowner agreement or easement or whatever it would take for that site. But it would at least get us started and allocate funds for the staff and engineer to begin pursuing that. So.
Steve?
I'm still a little fuzzy on this Hayward Avenue drainage outlet. And is this actually a monitoring test of the material, or is it actually a production, like an iron filter that we're putting in? So it's really designed to take out and hold a significant amount of phosphorus then?
Correct. That would be the objective of that entire effort, would be to put the Claros median into the channel area. We would look at a couple different designs of how we would place it so as to maximize its benefit in terms of its reduction or its ability. So, and then work with the Claros staff to remove them at different times to, because they can measure off-site then the amount of phosphorus being removed. So in addition, we would do monitoring upstream and downstream of that site.
So have we done the analysis to compare this to, I guess we would put an iron filter berm in there or something? Are we gonna try to remove that?
No.
What would we use if we didn't have this technology? Or does this allow us to do something we couldn't do before?
I don't think there's enough space there to do a traditional iron filter. And so the interesting thing about the Claros technology is the potential capacity for phosphorus removal in a very small footprint. So the idea would be essentially a full-scale demonstration project here that would hopefully achieve the removals in that watershed we want. But we don't know if that will be achieved or not because this hasn't been implemented in the field or not.
Right.
So the idea is to implement this as a kind of a full-scale project there and have monitoring, inlet, outlet, and then also have Claros come and remove the material and replace it on occasion and actually test it and see how much phosphorus is bound to the media.
So that would be done free of charge. You wouldn't be charging us to do that. Is that correct?
That's incorporated into the monitoring costs that have been put into the proposal.
So there's the media costs, but then the monitoring costs would be also for getting the material back and
Yeah,
checking it.
from the Claros side,
Yeah.
monitoring costs includes the recovery of the media and the measurement of the
Measurement
phosphorus.
of how much phosphorus is.
Are you a private company or are you with like a university or?
We have spun out of the University of Minnesota in May, and so we are a private company, but our facilities are all based out of the university at the
So
moment.
do you have stockholders and equity to get started?
No, not quite. We're still under the wing of the university at the moment.
I raise that question because this is what we would call industrially as a field test, where you have a new material and you want to go to the field and test it. And normally in those situations, if customers are going to provide their time and effort and engineering costs, et cetera, up to $60,000, the company would provide the media and their side of the grant free as part of their contribution. That's why I raised the question. I don't know whether it's not a lot of money, but I guess it's a question maybe we should ask the board to consider.
From the Claros perspective, we are still affiliated. We are still with the university, and we need to cover our own costs because it is a conflict of interest.
Okay.
I'm still a student at the university, and we are still very closely tethered, and so we need to cover our costs to avoid any conflict of interest between the university and Claros.
Right. I guess that changes the situation from what I originally thought, so.
The question I would have is, do we need all three of these to learn what we need to learn, or can we incorporate the project on the Peterson property after the work has been done there, or is that gonna increase the costs of doing this on the Peterson property?
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions there. Maybe I'll answer the second one. I think the work on the Peterson property, it'll probably be done at a separate time regardless. I think they're planning on moving forward quite soon with putting in the sheet piling. Is that correct, Mike?
No, actually, the water level now is, they moved the equipment off-site. They didn't, we didn't get out there. There was a lot of back and forth on the costs and materials, without getting into a lot of detail that delayed the original or the ultimate decision as to, because we left it up to the landowner, who was also the contractor, to decide. Basically, I said, it was a matter of that we could do one option for a set of dollar amount, and that was within our budget. So the other option that the landowner was interested in was higher, like twice as high. And I said, well, I'm not going to go to the board and ask for more money just for an option that provided eventually, in essence, an additional benefit to the landowner. So back and forth, they came up with, we worked on a different design that met both of our needs. And so that probably won't be implemented now until it dries out, so this summer sometime.
So it could potentially be coordinated then. So, and then your second question was, do we need all of these? No, we don't necessarily need all of them. And we were also kind of thinking about, if the board wanted to stage this, what kind of in order of preference, what would we want to do? And I think the Hayward one is probably our top site if we can get landowner permission. So I think we would hope to get maybe the engineering costs approved for that for right now, so we could start moving along, kind of contingent on Mike contacting the landowner and getting some sort of okay. The Peterson one could probably be put on hold if desired. The lake trial one is really kind of the simplest of them, and we could for sure implement that. It's just a matter of getting some lake volunteers that have docks and getting some of that material out out in the lake and seeing how does it work in a real world environment versus a test tube. Does it actually absorb this phosphorus, and is there other issues with algae growth and that sort of stuff? So, so if the board wanted to pare it down, what we had talked about was maybe authorizing the full lake trial and the engineering for Hayward, and then maybe waiting on some of this other stuff, and maybe some pieces of that could be paid for with the grant in the next year if we did get the grant.
Yeah, if we got the grant, we could use that, right, potentially.
Well, also noted that we intend, I mean, with something like this, you know, it's so cutting edge and innovative, and because, you know, we could be looking at all kinds of different things. I mean, the fact that, you know, most of our lakes have mercury impairments, for example, you know, so that's another area that they have designed for. I mean, so, you know, we could just look at a whole host of grants and do the applications and then just see how they come out. But we've been very successful in our grant applications. It's a matter of spending off some time to pursue that and get that. So, but we do, hopefully we'll have some additional capacity. We've got a new employee starting Monday, so that should help in the AIS area, so this might be a thing. There's also, one thing we've talked about is trying to come up with some trials to use this material for nitrogen in, you know, specifically in an area like Bone Lake where we have really close proximity of EWM to the inlets, you know, of the lake and various. So could we do some treatments and try to see if there's a correlation, you know? So I would agree with Greg's recommendation at this point, and then we'll just keep the board informed of how we're doing on the grant applications and continue to work with John and the rest of the Claro staff on pursuing other opportunities. I think there's, well, one also just on the tiles, drain tiles coming out of ag fields. You know, when you look at the size of this, again, you know, substituting it for some of the other best known practices presently, this is hands down a winner if it performs in the field as indicated.
Good. So if we approve the 20,000 engineering costs on the Hayward project and the 11,100 for the lake trial, that would be phase one, and we can start moving forward at least.
Yep.
How does that sound, Steve?
Just one last question.
Yes.
How many other test sites do you have? I know we're interested in having this technology be successful because we're always looking for new tools, but are we the only one you have? Or, I mean, if this fails, are you guys finished, or do you have a broader sample of sites that you're working on?
Yeah, as Mike mentioned, we do also have filtration systems for mercury, and we have some industrial partners in mercury mediation, and then we have also explored putting this phosphate sorbent into stormwater. So we're working with some private industries in stormwater as well.
All right, thank you.
So if we do this phasing, the engineering cost and construction administration and oversight, it would just be the engineering portion, correct? Because we're not going to be constructing anything.
Right, that's a good point. We wouldn't actually need the full 20,000 right now. I don't know that I can give you a breakdown off the top of my head, but
for sure
I'll
it's
keep
not to
tabs of them.
exceed 20,000.
yeah, definitely not to exceed 20. You could easily say not to exceed 15.
Okay.
I would almost say 10, but I'm a little hesitant to say 10.
So we could say not to exceed 15 for that one, and 11,100 for the other one. Does that sound to the rest of the board? Someone
Well,
want to make
I think
that motion?
I think this is important technology to move forward, and I certainly hope that we're reaching out to other sources than our normal ones for grant funds, so that we can expedite this. Waiting a year for something, I don't, how many of you saw that presentation, but it was pretty dynamic on how cost effective this is, and the reduction is amazing. And certainly is going to be less costly than anything else that we've used to date. So, so I don't want us to not move forward as quickly as we can with this. And that component, that other component, is aggressively looking for grants that we can apply to that maybe is not in our wheelhouse right now. So I will make the motion that we authorize the engineering cost and construction administration of Hayward Avenue drainage outlet not to exceed $20,000, and to also pursue the lake trial with volunteers. And that cost is not to exceed $4,000. It's just for the engineering, correct?
No,
On that one too?
the whole thing.
The whole thing, okay, not to exceed $6,000 then, for the full trial.
Isn't it 11,100?
I have 6 here,
Look on the front page,
It's on here.
and I have 20 here.
right here.
Okay, that includes all the other
Yeah.
components then, and not just that. Okay, so 11,100 on the lake trial.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. And this doesn't preclude us from moving faster if we get the engineering done and we got good things and we can work with the landowner, so this doesn't stop us from moving forward.
Or we get grant
we get
dollars,
grants
or
that- yep.
cooperative dollars from other sources.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now to the WJD 6 assessment and feasibility scope.
Go ahead.
Mr. President, managers, following up with the last watershed, you see there's a nice cover page that the district put together. We realized as we were coordinating all these, it would be helpful to see the 3, Castlewood, Hayward, and JD6, what was budgeted, the total budget for those 3, and our scopes, and then the balance. In particular, because as we went through, our biggest project was that headwater restoration project, and there's surveying, additional wetland water level monitoring needed to pursue looking at how to restore that ditch system and reconnect it to that wetland for that treatment, which is the 90% of the load that goes through that whole watershed. So that's the one we want to put our emphasis on in hopes of having, preliminary project plans cost estimate by August for the next round of the Clean Waterfront Grant cycle. But that really is the 2019 budget for JD6, that project with the surveying and all the modeling that we would need for plans and cost estimate. We heard, though, when we presented in January, it's good to have another project moving forward so that we have something in case, we run into hurdles with that project. So we put an optional task on the R70 wetland enhancement, so that's in that northwest portion of the watershed. I put the map up so to refresh your memory from that feasibility report. So some of the work that we would propose in 2019 that exceed that 60,000, but as you can see altogether, we're still, with all 3 sub-watersheds combined, we're still below the total 2019 budget for all of these. So if you wanted to add that one, this really gets us at some of the additional monitoring. We need more information about that wetland basin, just, bathymetry, the water levels, what does the sediment phosphorus look like, getting more information on wetland vegetation, the soil profiles, and, delineating where that boundary is, to kind of keep that one moving forward in the event that we decide to pursue that more fully in terms of engineering design and planning for 2020. So there won't be any modeling or engineering work in 2019, and that's watershed to just be that additional data collection.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any questions for Megan on that one? Concerns? Looks like we're within our budget, so that's not the issue.
Mr. Chair, the only question I want to make sure we verified is that use of the Sunrise Headwater. Is it truly the Sunrise Headwater? Because we've got 3 branches in our district of the Sunrise, and either one's the main channel and the others are tributaries, or something like that. But if we're going to use a term that specific, we better be careful and certain that it's right.
Mm-hmm. Manager Anderson, and that was brought up at a previous meeting, and I kept moving it forward because it matched with the report, but even on this slide, I try to scale back a little bit. Mm-hmm. We need to discuss, what we want to call that and not put a title where it's not due. So that's something that we need to follow up on and decide on how we want to call this, if it's just the JD6 restoration project as well. It's,
Until
we don't want to open a can of worms
No.
here.
Exactly.
It's not needed.
Let's just make it the JD6 if that makes sense to
Sure.
everyone.
Yes.
Well, or saying Sunrise River in parentheses JD6, which is what we did with JD2,
Sure.
Yeah.
you know, for years.
The only thing is that if this is gonna be a couple years out or something like that, being part of the Sunrise River is gonna be a high priority in one watershed, one plan already. So if we've got it in our title, it adds some.
And that's what I'm suggesting, is that we leave it in our.
Oh, we leave it in, oh, I'm
The
sorry.
Sunrise River in parentheses, former
JD.
JD6.
We're fine,
Just so,
We're just not identifying it as the headwaters because we don't know that.
right.
but it's part of the Sunrise River
Right.
system.
Watershed getting granted.
Yeah, I just thought from kind of a marketing standpoint and selling it for grants and also just, I mean, this could potentially be a really big and exciting project, so it just,
300 pounds is.
Yeah.
it'd just be nice to have a
Well, let's get-
catchy title to it.
Well, let's
so.
get that assessment of the Sunrise
Yeah.
River done.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that difficult to figure out, right?
Find all the.
One of
paths.
those three has to be the headwaters.
Well, they're all kind of headwaters,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of,
They all converge.
do you want it officially designated, and I
Yeah.
think.
Mm-hmm.
Mike,
Part of the sunrise, we know that, so at least we believe it's part of the sunrise.
so.
All right.
Just one other question. You have a statement in here about feasibility of pursuing a partial abandonment process for the ditch. And I'm wondering, what are you looking forward, or why did you mention that? What's the value of that, going to that next step?
Well, in order to, as part of that restoration process, we'd likely want to get the water back out into the wetlands and likely put some, I don't know if obstructions is the right word, but kind of change the profile of the ditch through there. And so because it is a public ditch, we cannot impact property owners without doing some sort of formal process. And so when we looked at this, there is actually quite a bit of elevation drop along this corridor. So I think, you know, we need to figure this out through this feasibility, but I think it will be possible to potentially do a partial abandonment of a section of that ditch, assuming that those landowners are agreeable. But what we'll need to do is assess that and do modeling and show that that's not affecting other landowners upstream of that. And part of this is also to engage the district attorney to make sure we're following the proper process and what might need to be done with this project. So I definitely think we have to do that. That's an important part of making this project happen.
Wow, we're all getting involved tonight.
I will make a motion to put forward the recommended motion on this page 4.
Yeah.
That we approve a motion to complete the additional monitoring, feasibility, and project design of the high priority Sunrise River, parentheses JD6, restoration project, and the optional additional monitoring for the medium priority R7D wetland enhancement project at a total cost of $80,193.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right. Watershed Management Plan Amendment. The big important thing here is we have a motion that we need to adopt this evening so we can get this started, and then I think we want to talk about this kickoff meeting in June. Is that correct, Mike? Those are the two big items for tonight.
You're correct, that's,
Mike and
Without
I talked
any-
earlier.
yes, I think the memo was fairly straightforward, but yes, those are the two main items. We have a resolution for the board to consider, and then also talk about the kickoff meeting. We are starting maybe a little bit ahead of what would be a normal schedule, but we are making that recommendation so that we would have plenty of time for citizen engagement, and then also for plan review, and then to have the board consider final adoption to put forth to the to the Bowser Board in a 2-year timeframe, roughly March or April in 2021. So we'll have it ready for our budget season in that particular year, even though it doesn't end until the end of September.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the only comment I would have, and I don't have a problem doing what you're suggesting tonight, but there are some items that I'm concerned about and would like to make sure that in the motion that we reserve some time at a future meeting to discuss the details of this.
Right, I talked to Mike earlier, since we had so much stuff on the schedule tonight, we are probably gonna have a workshop in the next few weeks, hopefully sometime in the next couple of weeks, maybe, to talk about some other things, and those kind of questions that you have, I think, are perfect for that workshop. We can start to flesh out this watershed management plan process, talk about our concerns and try to get on top of all of that. So does that make sense to you, Mike? I mean, we could include it in.
sure, of course. Anything.
Okay. So yes, I definitely agree that we got a lot of discussing too.
Well, it's mostly a timing.
Right.
As far as the format and all of that, I have
Yep.
no issues with that, but the timing, I think, is very aggressive and doesn't leave some, at least I didn't see the time allowed for public input. There's one mention, but not, and there's no reviews after the drafts are commented on and so on. So it's that kind of thing.
Right.
Mr. President, managers, I'll note that within the timeline that's offered, when you see any one of these steps, it's fully populated with a whole number of other steps below each one that provides a lot of that detail that's not in here. But just for brevity's sake and providing an overview, that's what this timeline, and we can do that rather, at a workshop or a different meeting. Sure. Pull that up.
Great. Okay, so we have a resolution to adopt. Are we ready to adopt that resolution? Need someone to
I
make a motion?
I will move to adopt the resolution as presented to begin the process of our management plan adoption.
Okay, that's 19-03-02.
1903-02.
I'll second.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All right, it's a roll call vote. John Spence, aye. Jackie Anderson.
Aye.
Wayne Moe. Aye. Stephen Schmaltz.
Aye.
Jen Oaknick.
Aye.
All right, phase one. Now we get to talk about our calendars in June. What timing are you shooting for, Mike? Middle to end of June, or?
Whatever works for the board. Presently, we are looking at the last week of June to be the summer mod tour that was just recently announced. So, which would conflict with our normal board meeting on the 27th. I guess this depends if what other people have schedules for, whether it's a Tuesday night on the 25th or the second week of June. We have a board meeting scheduled on the 13th.
The board meeting now is scheduled on the 13th?
Well,
We're moving it?
well, we already have one.
Oh, we have that, that's right, because we're in the 2 meeting
Correct.
season.
Right. So we would need to consider changing the other one on the 27th, and whether it's up a couple of days or something different, that would be for the board to consider. Since we don't have the team up calendar all set up and populated, we don't know if managers are scheduled to be out of town, and but we just wanted to try to get something set up for that particular
So
meeting.
if we could update our team up calendars for you in the next few days or week, then that would give you the chance to start digging around in there.
Could we do it the 13th? We've got a meeting set up already. We won't be into budgets by then, will we, or will we?
Well, I think that, well, two things. One is that for the last paragraph, it says that for the March 28th board meeting, we'll look at this date. It must occur after the initial 60-day agency priority issues comment period, which puts it in late June. So, so I would say, that last week, if we did it, if we moved our June 27th meeting to the 25th, we could do something along that line, or have it a wholly different, separate meeting in early July or something too.
What do you expect for time to do this kickoff? Is it time intensive? Is it like a workshop type of its own, or is it an item like we might deal with normally?
Well, it's kind of what the board wants, and we gave an example of what Browns Creek Watershed District did, or the last one where they combined it with an ice cream social to get public comment.
Gotcha.
So if we hold a meeting in an exciting environment like City Hall, City Council, or our building, we'll be drawing lots of people. But
yeah.
if you did it out at Lakefront Park or something like that, you might have more opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
You sure that wasn't just the ice cream?
Hard to say.
That'll draw people.
So we will, tell you what, we'll just reach out to the managers, we'll work on the team up piece, and then we'll try to, staff and I will work together on what we think would be an appropriate date, based on that input, and then try to communicate, especially if we're gonna have a workshop here, maybe in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, we could talk about it more.
Yeah.
I don't know of anything I've got going now.
Yeah,
That whole last week of June, so.
I think my calendar is gonna be fine for that week. I'm not going anywhere. I've already done my going.
Yeah, we stay on the lake in the summer,
Yeah.
so we'll be around.
Might have to drag me out of the water.
And it doesn't precisely have to be at 60 days. I mean, it can be anytime after that 60-day
Right, it just has to be
comment.
after, right?
After.
Yeah.
So it could be in early July.
Yeah, after the 4th, if that end of June.
Or on the 4th of July. Not the blowout or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Could have barbecue
There you go.
on every lake.
People have done that. All right. Okay, so we'll update our team calendars, and then we'll go from there. You guys can go from there.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, I know this is gonna shock everyone, but I actually think we're doing all right. But I still think we should move the Comfort Lake nitrogen study report final draft, postpone that, and the government manual revision, or the governance manual revisions, postpone that to a workshop in the next couple of weeks, if everyone is okay with that.
I'm okay.
Tentatively looking at maybe April 11th, Mike, is that a possibility, or are we not? Or the 9th, perhaps a Tuesday or a Thursday night? Again, we could update our team calendars and find out.
Right.
And what staff,
The 11th won't work for me.
okay.
Yeah, I'm out of town the 11th also.
So there's two,
Yeah.
so then we'll have to find something, but.
Okay.
So we'll have watershed management plan amendment, a more detailed discussion. We'll have the Comfort Lake nitrogen study report, final draft, and the governance manual revisions at that workshop.
Okay.
And anything else that you think we need to add between now and then.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So then let's go to item I, the State of the Watershed Public Meeting Update.
Mr. President, managers, we just had a few questions in terms of the structure of this inaugural event, as to what the board's desire or intention is regarding its outline. And then, to what extent is it going to be managers presenting or staff presenting? What sort of outcome and timeline for the evening here? So while it is something that we need to post as a public meeting, since all the managers would be there, but it's not really a meeting, you know, of course, it's more of an event for celebration of our Watershed champions.
Yeah. So there is an outline, right? I remember seeing an
Well,
outline.
at the last meeting, we talked about this, and just to, and this is up to each board member, but just so that all board members are involved, I made the suggestion that after your presentation, or your remarks, I mean, opening remarks, that I could do the opening, you would do the closing
Right.
as the new president, and then each of the managers could do the lakes that they're on. Now, we've got 2 from Bone, 1 from Forest, we're on Comfort.
Right.
So one of us can do Comfort or a Little Comfort and cover that. And that doesn't have to be the whole presentation, but at least the board members are part of it. And then the idea was that staff would have all this material broken down by our lake management districts, so that we're talking about the goals for each, the accomplishments to date, and what's to still be accomplished.
Sort of our report card.
With the,
right?
yeah, with the proper graphics, if you will, to highlight it.
Mhm.
But staff could be involved alongside of managers. It doesn't have to be all managers. That was just a concept I'd been thinking about, so that it's not just the president or the vice president speaking, it's every manager is involved.
Does every
And we can
manager
have
wanna be
EOR,
involved?
and we can have EOR involved as well, to talk about maybe some of the projects coming up in the new year, because they have a good handle on that, on a concise presentation, but it can't be too long.
No, it can't be.
And it's just enough to let people know what we do and who we are, and what our goal was when we started this thing 20 years ago, because it's also our 20th year anniversary. So we need to talk about that too, and then the philosophy that we've used all these years. And by starting at the upper end of the watershed, hopefully we can reduce costs going down, and talk about the adaptive management philosophy and all those key things,
Right.
and then get into the specifics within each lake district.
So how long do we expect that sort of a presentation to take? I mean, we're talking 15 minutes. How long do you have allocated for a review?
We intentionally did not try to plug this in too much with that information, because we're looking for guidance, basically. You know,
From
what?
us?
Correct. What is the board? This is the district's event, and you know, we'll provide all the details and work on all the pieces to make it happen. You know, so but you know, that being Jessica, of course, but you know, but and the staff will work on presentations. But for me, I guess I feel like the main central piece is the Watershed Champion Award itself, and want to make sure we have enough time to highlight those activities of those individuals and accomplishments and such, so we can provide that as well.
So you have 2 hours allocated for the whole meeting, right? 6:30 to, or was it an hour and a half? I don't remember.
6 to 8.
6 to 8.
With like starting at 5:30
Right,
or
with
7.
some order. I mean, I like your description of the outline. I think it's really good. I don't know if everyone wants to participate necessarily.
Well, we can
We can
resolve
strong
that. If 10 minutes per lake district, a 10-minute opener, a 10-minute closer, there's plenty of time for the Watershed Champion Award, but you can't really have that until you explain the district and how important all of these activities are, including that citizen involvement.
Yeah.
If it's, we had a person from the board acting as a liaison with this group, Jackie McNamara,
Right.
So if it's okay with the board, I'd like to replace her and work with staff here in these next few weeks to get this framed up with updates, of course, going out to you probably by email so that you can see the progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
And every manager can decide how much they want to do or how little they want to do. But certainly there's going to be an introduction of the board.
Well, you know, as far as if we're gonna report on lake districts, why don't we use that standard format we set up already, which shows how much phosphorus the lake, well, what the conditions of the lake are, how much phosphorus has to be removed to meet our target, what's been done so far, and what needs to be done, right?
Exactly right.
And
And
so that would be one page, and you could just talk
talk
from
to
that.
that.
Yeah, because they don't wanna get into any much more
no,
detail of that.
no, and that's exactly how it would be. You can't do much more than that in 10 minutes.
Right.
The only
And
thing.
in our lake management plan also, there's a great graphic in the plan on each district, what our goal was to begin with. So even having kind of a thermometer graphic that shows where we're at would be enough.
I would caution that there are very few people who live on a lake relative to the entire watershed district. So make sure that we don't focus too much on the quality of the lakes, because you might end up with some of those lake residents versus everybody else is kind of.
That's where the
Vibe.
opener comes in though, because the water bodies are the asset, of course.
Right.
Whether they're streams or rivers or lakes. And so that, that's covered in the opener, but it's the activity of each individual that lives within the district
Right.
that contributes to either the degrading of the lake or the water body or its improvement. So that sets the stage.
As long as people sense that everyone in the
Right,
district
right.
contributes
Yeah.
both to the success and the problems that we're trying to deal with. So don't think just because you don't live on a lake, you can pour oil down your storm drain.
Yeah. And the whole philosophy of doing that lake region or the lake watershed approach was because everything that happens ends up there.
Right.
And so if we're improving that lake, we're improving everything that contributes into the lake. It's just an easy way to categorize, a big area so that it makes sense. And people identify, and to your point, people identify to where their home is. And so if you can categorize where that home is, it doesn't have to be on the lake, but it's within that lake's drainage boundary. There's more ownership. So.
Right. I would just caution that once this is all put together, we
Yeah.
take a look at it just to make sure it's not.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes, it's a big worry of mine.
Okay. So you want to work with staff to shape this up a little bit more and keep in contact with us?
Oh, absolutely.
And drive us to do work
Yeah.
and to talk,
Yeah.
which is, one of our.
I've done a
nice
lot of
strengths.
these in my corporate life.
Sure.
And so I'd like to help get this organized so that we can have a successful program and get the message across that everybody participates.
I'm happy. Okay. And anything else you need from us tonight, Mike? Jessica?
Yes, actually, I would like the last paragraph here in the memo talking about encouraging participants from other local government entities. I think it would be really helpful to get that in-person invite out to some of these people. I do plan on sending email and letters invites out to these local government officials, but I really think that one-on-one invite from one local official to another could really help us out with attendance.
I think that's a great point, and actually something I was going to ask you if you had planned to do one from the district, and so I'm glad to hear that. And then I think we can all. We've got 2 Scandias, Wyoming.
In Chisago City too. We've
Well,
got.
yeah, Chisago City, and the township.
Yeah, is that really Chisago City that we want to focus on, or Chisago Township? Because
It's both.
it's both.
After
Okay.
the boundaries were withdrawn, Chisago City comes all the way down to Little Comfort.
Right. Okay, gotcha. So also then, so Steve, you could cover Forest Lake then, potentially, if you wanna go in person to one of the council meetings and just, maybe we hand them something like this, right? I mean,
Yeah, so my idea is that my letter and email invites will go out first.
right.
And then, you know, you could just go to one of their meetings and you can come with the invite. We can make it more, this invite more personalized as well to each city. And just kind of, you know, you got this letter, maybe it didn't even make it into their hands, you know, I don't know, but.
We have our new liaison here too, who's hearing about this.
Hearing
so
all of it.
I'm sure that will get passed along, but yeah, I like your approach.
So we can almost show up and just do the public input.
Yeah.
We don't have to get on their agenda necessarily.
No, I don't think so, but I think that
Someone in
having
person.
maybe our liaison here, bring it forward and one of us be in the audience, so if they want us to talk about it, we can.
Well, there's comments before the meeting starts, that would be a good time to
Yeah.
do it.
So being new to the area, hi, you are?
Paul Gerard, Forest Lake City Council.
Very good to meet you.
I've taken over for Sam, he has a conflict with school board,
Okay.
so I'm learning a lot. There's a lot of acronyms you guys use, by the way.
Sorry.
I was way lost on.
We need a playbook with all these things written out.
So when you run your public meeting, watch the acronyms, because they'll just kill you.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
good input.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I expect to come to this meeting every monthly.
Okay.
And Steve's point, the open forum at the beginning of the meeting's a great time, because to be honest, you don't have to spend the other 2 hours at the meeting. You can vote by 7:15.
So you and I can work to divide it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool, well, Jackie and I will work to divide up Wyoming and Chisago and the township, I don't know, if that's more in Moody area than.
It is, and I've just added it to the list here, but I can give you the date for that. I think it's the third Tuesday of the month for Chisago Lakes Township. And also, so we do have a list of all the acronyms and their definitions that we hand out to new employees. So we're sympathetic to you. We'll try to make sure it's on our website and then maybe also incorporate it into the public book over there for any visitors.
For reference.
For reference.
Yeah, nice, yeah. Okay, anything else then on the Watershed public meeting? All right, so let's move on to talk about office space. And the only caveat I will have is if during this discussion we get into issues of leases or purchases, we will probably want to talk about closed meeting. Chuck has been schooling me on things I have to be careful of. He's my parliamentarian referee, so if he starts throwing yellow flags in the air, I'm screwing up, but yeah.
Yeah. Steve and I just talked, and we think we should go into a private session, at least for this discussion.
Well, we can't do it for the whole discussion, is my understanding, right, Chuck? It would be only related to purchase or lease agreements?
Well, a closed session is authorized if you're discussing an offer or counteroffer for property, which would refer to purchase of a property, also reasonably to a lease of a property, but it's the discussion of basically the terms,
Okay.
financial and associated terms. So if there's a policy discussion among the board as to the direction that you want to go for office space, you know, there's features of that which should be in open meeting. It's basically closed session is to protect your negotiational posture with respect to the
Well, this is
the owner
what
of
we
the
have.
property.
We have financial information among the different properties.
Okay. So should we save that discussion until, say,
Yeah.
after the report of officers and managers, then we can have that discussion, we can let
Sure.
everyone else go?
Yeah, that's good.
Does that make sense? All right, so, all right, let's move on to the reports of staff. Administrators report, Mike.
Just noting that we did get, you see some nice photos there from the taken on Bone Lake for obtaining the core. Also, I'll note some activity in the permitting section. In a never-ending quest to try to improve our process and understand in more detail cost-benefit analysis of all of our programs, we've been working in the realm of the permitting. Staff has compiled a lot of information. I look forward to bringing that to the board and understanding or showing what our program is where it's effective and some questions. But also then along that line, I had attended a meeting last fall on some permitting questions to some other administrators, and I asked Erin to organize the first permit coordinators meeting, and she had yesterday, and it was a question apparently a lot of people had, is like they thought that, yeah, we should have this kind of coordination. So really look forward to where that's going, just overall. So that's good. The only thing I'll note is that we do, as far as things to do, we would like to have the managers go to the Lake Area Bank. There's 2 things to sign. One is just for the bank signers, and then also for the credit card, so make note of that. And then I have a few signature things that I'd like to make sure that we get done before we leave as well. Anything else?
Questions on the administrator's report?
Just under 3004, non-point source pollution abatement program, you're still talking to the SWCD about the ranking system, the tiering system, right?
Trying. I was, yeah, I've been, we have the study that we did, which we incorporated into the grant application, and we received the grant, and the board has now accepted. And I was trying to organize a meeting for next Wednesday, where the technical staff would meet with the UR staff that did Mike Talbot that did the modeling piece and the rural swim, and just basically have some information sharing, help them understand this tool, how it works. Not much of a reception on that. Basically, their view is, hey, you got money for us to implement projects, just tell us how much you're giving us and we'll go do it. So what I wanted to look at is through the conservation planning. So the Bowser is giving money to the SWCDs for a person to do conservation plans. And what that means is they look at the whole farm and they look at their tillage and their tillage methods and timing and cover crops and soil types, the usual universal soil loss equation calculations, and then I would like to see that we have the farmer's financial interest at heart, that we understand and we communicate with them which system on their farm would be best suited for them. And so to understand their nutrient management, understand their conservation, their tillage, and then does that make the most sense compared to us just coming in and saying, well, here's a structural practice and let's just throw it in here and then let's walk away, without discussing their overall farming operation. So tell me, because right now I just feel like the left hand doesn't have much interest in talking to the right hand. So so I'm going to continue to talk with them about this. I may bring something back. In fact, that because one of the things that I think that we would like to see done in the district is there is such a thing, a requirement under USDA where farmers have to farm to something called 2 times T. It's twice the tolerable soil loss level. But think about that. It's still 2 times that level, not the tolerable level. So why wouldn't we have a program where if we're going to offer taxpayer monies where we would say, no, we have an expectation of you meeting the tolerable soil loss level. But that would be out of norms of their current programs, but it doesn't mean that we can't incorporate something like that if we're providing a financial incentive, especially if we're going to use any local funds. Right. So I guess more to come, but I think irrespective, I want to have their conservation planning staff assigned to do probably the top 3 to 4 farms within the Bone and Moody Lake drainage areas, and then look at those as a pilot, so to speak, compared to then the structural pieces. But we also just, we want to use the grant money, but we don't want to use it just to use it. And I suggested that what I was proposing could be the framework for the One Watershed, One Plan, because we know we will have limited funds in that entire drainage area when you talk about total acreage.
Any other questions about Mike's report?
Sorry I asked that one.
Yes, I get a little bucket.
Mike might have some passion around this.
Oh, one other,
It's frustrating.
my apologies, I did have an oversight here, and thank you, Jessica, for reminding me. We do have the AIS grants from Washington County
Right.
that need action as well. So there were 2 grants, one for Flowering Rush and the other one for the Fish Lake and Bone Lake Watercraft Inspection Program. So there's a,
It's on the side pile.
Did you get this? I had 3 of these.
It's on the pile that we received, right?
The detailed plan.
So there's a,
correct.
that's that one. Yeah, I just looked over and noticed it was sitting there and we hadn't even touched it yet, so I was going to ask about it.
Okay. Thank you, Greg, for reminding us.
All right, so this is the grants that we've received from Washington County. We just have to accept them. Right?
I'll make a motion that we authorize the board president to sign the 2019 AIS prevention grant agreements.
I'll second.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Chuck, you got cut out of that one. I don't have to ask you a thing.
I taught you everything I know.
All right. Okay, EOR, anything additional?
Nothing additional.
All right. Smith Partners, anything?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
Oh, you guys are helping my schedule a lot. All right, reported treasurer.
Okay, this month we had income of $52,018.63, and we have expenses of $73,799.46. So I'm asking the board to approve payment of those expenses for this month.
I'll make a motion to approve the treasurer's report, pay the bills.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Report of officers and managers. Steve?
Just a quick update on the last meeting we had at the One Watershed, One Plan. We finished our first of 6 areas in terms of goals, outputs, and priority locations. That was for wetlands, and I guess I was fairly impressed with the list of stuff that they had developed in terms of needs and so forth. It kind of pointed out to me, though, that there's a lot to be done out there, and you got 7 other areas to do the same thing in. We really need to get this PTM, prioritized, targeted, measurable, in place because we're not going to have enough money to do everything. So that was one thing. The other thing they reported was that we're 6 months behind schedule on the plan. So now we will not have the plan completed until June of 2020. So it's getting pushed back. It'll probably be later than that too by the time we're done. So we're looking at probably 2 years of planning, basically, and spending money. So that's not too encouraging. If anybody wants to see that wetland summary of what they want to do, I can send it to you. Just let me know. Jackie, you want to say anything else about that?
No, I think it's, it takes time to do a plan, and that's what they're doing. So it's kind of like us doing our plan amendments, or our first plan even.
Our first plan, because this
Yeah.
is their first plan, right? Their
Yeah.
first full
Yeah,
plan.
so it's moving along, and I just like Steve said, I've been impressed at the way that they're handling it, which is pretty much by section. And so wetlands was this last one, before that was ag when you were.
I was gone,
You were
yeah.
gone. And so they're doing the same thing for each section. So it allows plenty of time for the policy committee members to review things, because they're doing it, you know, month by month by section. So it's very, very impressive. They haven't gotten down to their strategies yet, and so these are goals for each of those areas. And, yeah, so yeah, I think it's moving along fine. I personally am a little concerned that Anoka County and Pine County, which has very small portions of their county in this plan, have equal representation. Chisago County is almost 100% in the sub-watershed, and Washington is probably 70 or 80%, and yet we all have one member equal representation on that committee. I find that a little bit troubling.
It doesn't seem quite
Yeah.
right, does it?
Yeah. But anyway, other than that, it's moving along fine.
Anything else from your perspective, David?
Well, I have one thing.
Did Steve?
Oh,
No, I'm finished.
you do? Okay. I have one thing, and it's kind of in that same vein with the One Watershed, One Plan. Mike, did you make copies for the board members with this? I left this with you last week.
No, I did not bring that. I apologize.
Well, we'll get this out to you by email, but this is a message from January 4th, 2019, from Frank Jewell, the Clean Water Council Chair, and John Link, MPCA Commissioner John Jaski, Bowser, of course, we know him. Anyway, it's laying out the state perspective for the One Watershed, One Plan. And I think it's helpful for all of us to have this so that we understand how the state is looking at this. There's no backing out of it, and they've got some specific statewide goals that they're trying to incorporate through this bigger alignment. So if we can get this out to the board members tomorrow, then they can take a look at it. But it's very important, I think, foundational information. This was handed out to the MAUD board at my first meeting, so that's, I wanted you to have it. Okay, that was it.
Yeah? Anything?
Okay.
Wayne?
No.
All right, so the only thing I wanted to say was I'm hoping in the future as we go forward, we can keep these meetings to 2 hours. I'm trying to keep it to 8:30. I knew tonight we weren't gonna be able to just based on my estimates. So we know we can't keep it to a fixed time, but at least I'm gonna try to estimate it and see how far off we are and then work with Mike and like we did tonight, maybe move some things around and try to keep it down. But if we have a topic that has to be discussed, we're gonna discuss it, so don't worry about that. I know we would all rather have two 2-hour meetings, I suspect, than one 4-hour meeting. So we'll shoot for that. And the other thing, in the future, I'm hoping to get, and I'm hoping to work with Mike, we can try to get the board packet maybe out a little bit earlier. The only reason I want to be able to do that is to get the consent agenda into everybody's hands so that we can review it early. And if there are things that need to be addressed, try to get those edits back to Mike and staff so that they can make them. And as long as we get them made by Monday of the week of the meeting, they can update the online information. We can still put it in the consent agenda, and I'd like in the future that the consent agenda just be done, just not with the
It's
edits.
all a factor of getting the packet early enough.
Right. If you need some time to review it, and getting it on Friday may not be enough time, so that's fine. We'll work around it, but I'll work with Mike, and I know that already I'm probably challenging them to even get it a minute earlier, but Jessica's over there just about ready to throw something at me. Anyway, so that's all I had, and then I don't know if there's anything in the direction. I don't remember. There was a couple things that were completed. And I think there's 3 items still on the, a few more. So 5 items that were completed. I forgot to turn it over. And I don't know how many things we added tonight. I'm sure a few. So if there's any issues with what you see on the board direction, let Mike or staff know, and we'll go from there. All right, so now we'll move back to the office space discussion, and in order to do that, we need to close the open meeting.
Mr. Chair.
Walk me through it.
You would want, you would want a motion to close the meeting in order to discuss an offer for office space at one or more particular properties, and you will need to identify those properties, preferably by address.
Okay.
And then, presuming you do go into closed session, once you're in closed session, you again need to identify those properties for the closed
For the
session
closed
audio.
session. Okay. All right. So we need that motion.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session to review the offers for various sites.
And do we have to identify each one of them? We have to identify each one of them.
Okay, our current location, I don't have the addresses with me. I
44
apologize.
Lake Street?
44 Lake Street.
South.
South, okay. The Schilling Plaza on Highway 97. The property on the BP Strip Mall on Highway 97, and the Sears Building on Greenway Avenue.
Good enough? Okay.
I'll second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we're in closed session. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.